An advertisement for the Monolith brand of cars is shown at the opening of the film. Thanks to the unique qualities of each part, this vehicle was named the safest in the world. Technological advancements include a glass vehicle, body tires, and an anti-roll sensor. You can operate all of this from within the vehicle or with an artificial intelligence-connected mobile app named Lilith. Next, we see one of the car's passengers returning with her toolbox for a more in-depth analysis. Sandra and her son, David, who is 2 years old, are pictured here. Have a pleasant evening. Tell me how I can be of service. Sandra was going to visit her mother-in-law, but her husband couldn't make it because of his job as a pilot. Looking at this data, it's clear that this Monolith branded car is so smart that it can calculate the weight of each passenger. The short version is that Sandra went to one of those gas stations that doubles as a mini-market. In the restroom of the mini-market, Sandra changed David's diaper. Subsequently, she purchased a snack for David in the expectation that he would not be picky. An unknown man appears out of nowhere and approaches Sandra's car with the intent to steal it. Sandra, though, is able to get over the problem with the help of her cell phone. That was just the beginning. David had moved away from her side, but she was too engrossed in the elegance of her vehicle to care. Until she began to suspect the stranger's child was actually hers, she searched high and low. Sandra was in a state of panic, but it was later discovered that her child had been in the restroom with the 3 women. As soon as Sandra got in the car, she locked herself into the vault mode feature, determined to end the ordeal with those 3 women. For the sake of the safety of the passengers, this feature effectively keeps them inside, away from any outside disturbances. Leaving, they persisted in traveling to David's distant grandmother's house in order to alleviate her boredom. A childhood friend of Sandra's was staying at a hotel close to the airport when Sandra phoned her. The fact that her friend Jetta had already informed her that she was actually staying with Carl was the most shocking part. What this means is that Sandra was deeply disappointed when Carl ended up having an affair with her friend. Everything came crashing down for Sandra the second she arrived at her mother-in-law's house. She was so let down that she hadn't even planned to go inside. Carl also pretended to be busy and ignored Sandra's calls, even though he was cheating on her with her friend. Sandra made up her mind quickly to accompany her husband to Los Angeles' main airport. The 320 miles that separate this city from the rest is no laughing matter. Since Lilith is an intelligent man, he tells Sandra that they will be delayed in their journey due to a major accident on the expressway. On the highway, an accident has occurred. Anticipated setbacks. Instead of sitting in traffic, Lilith proposed they take the off-road route, which would save them time. Sandra continued along that road even though it had the fewest vehicles for the next 50 miles. Afterwards, nightfall approached. Sandra could only make out the electrical substation in the midst of this desolate wasteland as the fog grew thicker, and no human settlements appeared. At the moment, the problem is that Sandra is in such a state of fear and anxiety that she fails to notice the presence of a deer crossing. She hurried outside to see how the half-dead deer was doing. Sandra even put her child in neutral and left them in the car all alone. Afterwards, there was a time when David accidentally opened one of my connected apps by pressing the app on his mobile phone. We are all aware that vault mode protects passengers from various outside dangers and disturbances, but Sandra had no idea that David had begun activating it. Since David, who is just 2 years old, doesn't comprehend anything either, Sandra won't have much of a chance if this is true. No matter Sandra's instructions to the contrary. However, David remains completely perplexed. David accidentally dropped Sandra's cell phone because Sandra, overcome with extreme panic, shocked him right away. For the life of me, I just don't understand how a mother's carelessness can cause something seemingly little to quickly escalate into a major issue. Even more impressive is the fact that Sandra's attempt to shatter the glass reveals the true strength of this monolithic car, which is more than just an advertisement. Sandra, seeing no other way out, decided to go in the other way, if only to inspect one of the electrical substations she had noticed here. Sandra had low expectations due to the lack of company, but she made the most of it. Discovered a flashlight and a wrench, among other useful tools, which she would inevitably use to smash the glass as she was about to exit the substation. It dawned on Sandra that a wild animal had noticed her whereabouts. Sandra was actually attacked by an honest-to-goodness wild coyote. This car was incredibly safe. But you'll make things more difficult for Sandra and other careless owners, and that's why you're doing it, to preserve the technical. To sum up, Sandra awoke during the day. It wasn't until she got in the car that she noticed David's condition, which appeared frail. An instrument in the vehicle keeps track of the sun's heat and displays it as an increasing number at regular intervals. It's terrible because there isn't a single car going by on this extremely quiet road. After considering her options, Sandra chose to walk in the direction of the road in the area. Sandra persisted in walking, even though she had never been here before and was already dehydrated, putting her childhood at danger by possibly abandoning it in the car. The good news is that she happened upon a river nearby by chance, so she was able to wash herself and drink from it. In her quest for assistance, Sandra traversed a steep road for tens of kilometers. Sandra came to a location that had once been an airport and saw an aeroplane there. The interior of the vehicle, meanwhile, is heating up. Because of the gravity of the situation, the monolith car's emergency fan kicks in right away. There may not be anyone at the airport, but Sandra must now race against the clock anyhow. Subsequently, she uncovered 2 airplane tires, a gallon lighter, and alcoholic beverages. She wasted no time setting fire to the 2 tires with these objects, hoping that someone would notice the thick smoke that would result. Sandra then filled up the gallon with just a bit of river water, on purpose, so she could carry it to her car. David appeared frail and his face was beginning to turn red and burned when she reached the car. Sandra could only pray that nothing had come of her hard work, while spritzing the top of the vehicle. In addition, she persisted in pounding the vehicle with a wrench, but so far, there have been no visible outcomes. Her child's life had run out, and she knew he or she would die in this futuristic vehicle. Still, David's little finger movement proved that her assumption was partially correct. There was still the matter of confronting the coyote that had been tailing her the night before, despite her current state. Now that she wants to be with her dying child, she doesn't care if the coyote bites her. It became clear that the coyote had come specifically for the purpose of devouring the lifeless deer. As a result, Sandra's car was able to free itself and begin to reverse. Thankfully, a tiny pebble remained in the way of the vehicle's progress. Sandra had a grand plan that she was going to implement on her vehicle shortly after this. She is unconcerned about the 50-50 odds of success or failure because she is at a loss for what to do next. She wasted no time in removing the obstruction to her car tire by hammering it with a wrench. Once Sandra achieved her goal, she deliberately drove her car into a ravine while David was still inside. The time required is minimal. The current functionalities are immediately usable. At that very second, the high-tech sensor will start to pick up on the gravitational pull. Sandra hurried down to her child's car as soon as the wreckage had settled. It was Sandra's brilliant idea, after all, because the car had promptly unlocked itself as soon as it touched down. Sandra then removed her son's jacket to help him cool down. Also, the model kept the system running until Sandra could fix it. Become a driver once more. Sandra was crossing her fingers that the high cliff ahead of her wouldn't be too much for the car's technology to handle at that moment. Naturally, the car player doesn't find it to be a major issue. Surprisingly, Sandra could get back on the off-road. Following this, she follows the crowd and takes the high road. Sandra and David reached the hospital by the film's conclusion. Thankfully, David was spared. And this, without a doubt, will be Sandra's worst nightmare come true. The movie ends after that. I am still curious to see how her marriage turns out, even though the film has ended. And to Carl, who had cheated on her. Alright everyone, that concludes our coverage of Model of 2016. Much thanks for your time. Reconvene with you in the subsequent video.